Adoptables. Are they a scam, or possibly one of the most genius things to come to the online art community? Stay tuned, folks. This one gets interesting. Hello, and welcome to Art Block, the show where we talk about art and how it's made. I'm your host, Spirit, and today we'll be talking about adoptables. More specifically, the question of whether they are a scam. What is an adoptable, you might ask? Well, for those who might be new to the online art community, an adoptable is a pre-made design, usually of a character or custom species. The methods of creating and selling adoptables are varied, ranging from auctions to drawing the character to adopt them, to things like make your own slots when it comes to things like closed species. Now when it comes to the topic of whether adoptables / closed species are a scam, I believe it all breaks down into a few different categories. 1. How easy are they to manufacture? 2. How much of the work is being done by the artist? 3. What is the purpose of the adoptable / why is it being made? 4. How much is the artist charging? And 5. How easily accessible is the species or style? So the first thing is, how easy are they to manufacture? This all comes down to the amount of time and effort an artist will put into their creative work. Especially if you are active on furry Twitter, you will often see a lot of hand-drawn adoptables often being made by popular artists. These are often well-designed characters that obviously have a lot of thought put into the engineering of the design. Having a good understanding of character design is something that usually comes with a lot of years of practice, and especially for those who may be inexperienced or don't want to learn how to draw, adoptables can be a good opportunity for those who want to have a character of their own. Like clothing, pre-made characters can be used to express your style in a way you see fitting, while also not having to go through the process of learning how to draw yourself. Of course, there are some artists out there who will buy adoptables simply because they love the character design, or want to have some art from a particular artist, and that's totally fine. However, at the same time, a majority of people who I've seen buying adoptables are usually people who cannot or don't want to learn how to draw, and that's totally fine. After all, think about it this way. Imagine you're someone new online and you really want a character of your own. Then you see this great character design going around for $20. It includes a reference of the character, their design suits you personally, and you think they'd be a great fit. You buy the character, and you get to use them for future commissions. Seems all good, right? Well, this is when we come to the second part of the discussion, which is how much work is being done by the artists. A lot of upper-tier adoptable makers will usually draw each of their adoptables by hand, thus allowing each character to look and feel unique, and warranting the price since there's usually a lot of time putting into making the drawing and figuring out the design. However, there are cases of adoptables being made on bases, pre-made line work, or other resources that might be made by other artists. Now, of course, a lot of these resources were made to be used for adoptables, and that's fine. If an artist is okay with someone using their work for adoptables and are allowing their work to be used for monetary gain, that's up to them. The major thing that bothers me here is the fact that character designs can be made with less than half the work and are still sold for a bunch of money. This also pertains to creating adoptables on character generators. I've talked about the character generators from time to time, and as a resource to come up with a base concept, I think they're fine. But really? It takes maybe like 20 minutes to make a character on these, and it's usually pretty obvious when someone has made a character on a character generator because everyone has seen the base puppet floating around somewhere. This is where I start to feel that adoptables start leaning from the realm of harmless fun into, well, lazy ploys to get money. Even using bases or other pre-made line work requires some level of creative effort to make look complete. But character generators? Nah, all you need to do is click which pieces you want along with the color and they're going to be all set and ready to go. Who cares about creative integrity or the fact that you're essentially profiting off of someone else's hard work? Now, to be fair, most people are smart enough to know when something is made on a generator or with a base. Personally speaking, I don't think base work or work that uses pre-made line work should be charged at the same rates as original art. Of course, there are cases where artists will make their own baseline work and then modify it slightly for adoptables, and in these cases I feel that this is a bit more acceptable since they're still the one doing the work, but are also expediting the process. When it comes to doing art as your career, understanding when to cut corners is necessary for the growth of your business, especially if you're a freelancer who needs to balance your time. This leads us to point number 3, which is asking why an adoptable is being made in the first place. Artists make adoptables for their own personal reasons. Sometimes it's necessary to ensure that they're making enough income, sometimes they'll have made the character because they wanted to but don't really have the time to do anything with them, so they'll decide to sell them. There are also cases where genuine intention is behind adoptables, however, it seems like a lot of the time they can be no more than cynical money grabs. I feel that this is the case when either a bunch of artists will make cloned characters with a few edits to make them quote-unquote different. Y'all know what I'm talking about, those adoptables that have one baseline work and are only differentiated between color and maybe markings. This also happens when an artist will draw a character by hand but will charge an absolute buttload of money. Like, yes, I understand charging maybe $40 or $50 to compensate for your time designing the character and making the ref. Especially if the character is complicated or took a long time, I could understand having a higher price tag. There are also, of course, cases when people are paying for the artist's work rather than the character. Especially with popular artists, people are caring less about the design and more just want some art from the artist. But at the same time, I come to ask why you would buy a pre-made design from them when you could commission them for custom art. Maybe it's just me. Personally, I prefer to get custom artwork over buying pre-made stuff because I feel that getting artwork of my own characters has more personal value. And there are cases where artists will find it more lucrative to create pre-made adoptables over taking commissions. Commissioning can be a tedious and taxing process. And given the fact that there is a market for adoptables, I can understand why some people will take this route. This also brings me to the topic of closed species or adoptable rules. One particularly scammy thing I've seen a lot of people do with adoptables is have it made so that they can revoke the character or say you can't edit the design after the purchase is made. For one, when people are buying adoptables, they're usually buying it for the character design. I did mention buying adopts since it is something made by popular artists, but this is far more niche than people might expect. Placing unnecessary or protective rules on a character when you're selling the design is not only really sketchy, but not something I find worth investing in. Especially with the lines of, I can reclaim this OC later, or whatever people say nowadays, the idea of someone paying money for your character and then you just taking it back because you don't like what they're doing with it is not only shady, but is technically stealing. If you can't part with the character enough to where the new owner can make changes, or you want to have the option of taking them back, that's clearly a sign you aren't ready to part with them and shouldn't sell them. This also brings me to the topic of closed species. Now in some cases, I think closed species can be pretty cool, and there are times where people will end up making a really cool concept for maybe a story or otherwise that gets really popular. Closed species such as primogens can end up having a really cool lore behind them that can be really special to the creator, and especially if they catch on, it can be really frustrating for the person who originally made them. There are also cases of licensing issues, like if your species or concept is reserved for something official. People making and selling adopts of that thing can come up as a bit of a problem in the legal department. However, at the same time, there can be times where people will make a basic hybrid or just come up with a design they liked and then make it a closed species. An example of a closed species that I used to like but just kind of became over the years is a species called pond ponies. Now back in the day of the pony craze, I remember these being one of the big things to come out of the fandom. However, as time passed on, I started to realize there were quite a few problems with the species. Specifically with how many restrictions the owners had on the quote-unquote original species. For one, the only way that you could get one was via adoptable or make your own. You couldn't sell them without explicit permission from the species owner, nor could you trade them for anything except for other closed species of equal value, and they were based off of a pre-established lore and style. No shade towards the original creators, y'all do you, but I think this is a major problem with closed species. Of course, you can't control when something gets popular, but honestly, is over $60 worth a pony with some beads and a mane made of water? Paying to get a closed species is like paying to get an expensive name brand. Sure, if you really want to pay for it, you can get into the quote-unquote cool kids club, but honestly, I'd rather just make my own character or some species that inspired by it. In the least, I'll be able to make something to my liking rather than having to deal with a bunch of rules. This brings up the discussion of how much an artist is charging. I've already mentioned it before, but I believe the reason why you should charge for an adoptable is for the time you put into making it. Of course, I would encourage artists to take opportunities to further their business, and if it means charging a little more to accentuate your brand, then that is okay. However, if you are charging hundreds of dollars for a simple 30-minute sketch, then I would say you may be going a bit too far. It does come down to individual circumstance, and in some cases if people are willing to pay more for art, then I'd say consider your opportunities. Just don't be greedy with it. Remember, charge for your time working. Heck, if you can even record how long it takes you to finish, then you can calculate based on an hourly rate. Lastly, but certainly not leastly, when it comes to adoptables and closed species, we need to consider how accessible they are. What I personally feel makes a closed species a bit more scammy is the fact that the access to the design is artificially restricted, usually for monetary gain from the creators. Like I said, there are cases where a species can be closed for more personal reasons, such as the species being very special to the creator. However, if you are keeping something closed for the purposes of only monetary gain, then it may be time to reconsider your priorities. So, are adoptables a scam? Personally, I think it comes down to an individual basis. When it comes to making adoptables, I think we all need to think about what would be ethical towards our customers. In general, don't overcharge people just because you can, don't restrict access to a closed species just so you can make more money, and charge to compensate for your time rather than the value you put in the design. Having good, honest business practices will be far better for you in the long run than charging hundreds for a design that you made on a base. And please, 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 don't make adoptables or customs off of a base that is stolen or traced. I have seen artists trace official artwork of companies and manage to make bank off of it, all for artwork that is not theirs. If you are incapable of drawing the base but still want to make adoptables, please either buy a pay-to-use base from an artist or find free ones that allow adoptables. Also, be super wary when seeking out bases through Google. There are a lot of websites like KissPNG which will steal the raw file from other websites and then offer them for free. As such, I personally recommend looking via the official website such as DeviantArt, Furfinity, or Twitter. Either way, that's enough from me. Do you guys think adoptables are a scam? What are your opinions on closed species? Tell me about it in the comments below. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. And that's about it for today's video. If you liked what you saw and you want to see more, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. It supports me and is practically free. Also be sure to follow me on Twitter and DeviantArt where I post artwork and updates about the show. A big thank you to my patrons such as Maxashir, Mr. Eaton, and Z-Blade for supporting the show. If you would like to join them, the link to my Patreon and merch shop is in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching, I'm Spirit, and I'll see you next time.